Hi, this is Jerry Volesky, Range and Forage Specialist with Nebraska Extension. Today I want to talk a little bit about some of our annual forage options during drought. This will include both the cool and warm season species out there that are available, as well as some of the different grazing management needs of these annual forages. Now I like to break up the annual forages by the time of year that they're planted. And so to start, I'll cover some of the spring seeded species. And these include mostly the cereal grains such as oats, spring triticale, spring barley, but there can also be things like field peas and several other legumes, as well as some annual ryegrasses. Now, with the spring cool season annuals, our planting dates are can be from mid-March to mid-April, looking for a soil temperature of at least 43 degrees. Now, the seeding rate certainly can vary by some of the different species you're using. You might check with your seed supplier or your local extension office. And same for fertilization. Soils test is always best to determine what the needs actually are. Now, on those seeding rates, we recently completed a study just last spring, and we had some Goliath forage oats. And we planted 4 different seeding rates of either 25 pounds per acre, 50, 75, or 100. And those correspond to the bar shadings. And we did this at 3 locations. The first one was called HPAL, which is the High Plains Ag Lab near Sidney, Nebraska. NP is North Platte, Lincoln being Lincoln, Nebraska. Then over on the right side, we just have the main effect, the mean yield by seeding rate for those 4 different seeding rates. And what we found is that at 50 to 75 pounds per acre of oats, there was no difference in forage yields. It was slightly greater, significantly greater than 25 pounds per acre. So this just suggests that oftentimes we can get by with a bit lighter seeding rate. Now in this study, we also had 3 different nitrogen fertilization rates. This included 0, 30, or 60 pounds nitrogen per acre. And again, it was the same 3 locations, Sidney, Nebraska, North Platte, and Lincoln. And here we did see a linear response of increased forage yield with increased nitrogen fertilization rate. And so in general, our typical overall recommendation of a spring planted cereal grain for forage is probably in that 60 to maybe 70 pounds of nitrogen per acre as far as the application goes. Again, typically we are planting these small grains for forage, and in some of our trials here, we typically go here at North Platte. We'll typically plant around the end of March to the first part of April. Our forage harvest date would typically be about the 3rd week of June, and that can vary a little bit by the species of spring cereal grain you're planting, as well as some varieties. Typically, a lot of the ones that are designated as forage varieties of these small grains are a little bit more later maturing. Evergreen Oats, for example, or Everleaf Oats, for example, is a fairly common forage variety of oat, and that is typically ready for a hay harvest towards the early part of July. Just some of the yields and trials we've done here at North Platte back from 2015. Here you are showing the harvest date, and when we do our trial harvest for hay, we're looking for a late milk to soft dough stage. But as you can see with these different oat and barley and spring triticale varieties, we're in certainly the 3.5 to almost 5 tons per acre dry matter production. So that's quite good. Now a little bit about the summer annuals or warm season annuals. This includes the millets, which would be the grazing and hay types. The grazing types of millet would be pearl millet, and then the hay types would be like our Siberian or German or white wonder foxtail. Then we have the sorghum Sedan grass hybrids, our straightforward sorghum Sedan grass, as well as some other warm season grasses that can fit into this category, such as crabgrass, teff, or corn, or as well as several different more warm season legumes. Again, with those warm season annuals, they have a pretty wide planting date range from mid-May to August, and they like to have at least a 60-degree or so, excuse me, soil temperature. Again, with the seeding rates, they can vary significantly depending on the species you're dealing with, and most of that has to do with the seed size of each of those species. And in general, we look at the productivity of those summer annuals under irrigation or irrigated conditions. 4 to 5 or sometimes even 6 tons per acre is generally pretty realistic. Some of the shorter species, such as the foxtail millet or the teff, we're looking at 3 to 4 ton per acre dry matter yield potential. I mentioned planting date has a pretty wide range for these warm season annuals. I just got a couple of pictures here showing 3 different species. We have some teff here on the left, white wonder foxtail millet, and a sorghum Sedan hybrid. But these were planted on July 11th, and this photo is just 48 days later at the end of August, and showing the growth we had in that relatively short amount of time. And in this picture, it is actually a late July planting, and then also again 48 days later, which puts us to September 13th when this photo was taken. And the dry matter yields of those 2 different planting dates here on top is July 11th. You can see the sorghum Sedan grass, a little over 4 tons, and about 2.5 tons for the white wonder foxtail millet and a teff. And even at that late July planting date, just about 4 tons for the sorghum Sedan, and under 3 and about 2.5 for the millet and teff, respectively. Then when it comes to summer or late summer seeded forages, and we're thinking about fall or winter grazing or some forage potential there, again, the spring seeded small grains such as oats, barley, the spring triticale, or even spring wheat fit into this category quite well. Other things like ryegrass, peas, turnips, or many other brassicas or cover crop type species also fit into this potential window here. Planting dates for these are typically late July through about the end of August. And then, of course, you can have your traditional winter annual cereal grains, such as the winter wheat, rye, or triticale. And those we're looking at the late August to mid-September, or even a little bit later planting date that works. And then generally very little fall or winter forage from them, but it's mostly the following spring you're looking at if you're thinking of including some of these in your forage plan. Oh, so for some of the small grains, and here we did a trial where we planted in just about mid-August. We had some spring triticale, oats, a couple varieties of oats, winter wheat, and a spring wheat. And we harvested them in late October, and we're just showing here the height. But again, the productivity was pretty good with that late summer seeding, a little over 4 tons, 3 to 4 tons per acre, with those spring cereal grains from a mid-August planting to late October. Some other possibilities that we've seen people use, for example, here is a combination of oats and turnips. This would have also been planted in the mid to latter part of August, and got some heifers grazing on these, but the photo is from November 1st. And with these cool season small cereal grains, or things like the turnips or brassicas, they do take pretty cold temperatures before they freeze down. We're talking usually in about the the 15-degree type of freezes before they begin to lose their green and completely lie down and fall to the basically fall to the ground. So of course, some other options related to annuals, and when we're talking now about into our other types of cropping systems we might use, certainly with irrigated wheat, After wheat harvest in mid-July, you can use a number of different things. This picture here just shows a forage cocktail or a cover crop mixture interseeded into wheat stubble in late July. And this would probably be August or late August photo. And then another possibility of some things that we work with in trials with annuals is to mix a winter and non-winter hardy cool season species. And the idea behind this is to have both some fall, considerably more fall forage, as well as that winter hardy species coming back, of course, the following spring and providing us with some spring grazing. So some of the things we looked at were like combinations of winter rye and oats, rye and turnips, and I believe that's what this photo is here. Some winter triticale plus spring triticale, and also winter triticale with oats. And what we found with these, that it does work out fairly well. We put in a seeded each at about the half rate as you would if you were seeding them in a monoculture. Just a couple of photos of that. Here is some rye and turnips showing 44 days after planting. Most of the obvious growth, of course, that you see is the turnips, but the rye, of course, is certainly in there. And again, we know that come November, December, the turnips are going to be completely frozen down and basically out of the picture for the season, but that rye will be back the following spring for additional grazing. Here's just another one of rye and oats, and most of what you're seeing is going to be the oats. On planting dates, just a photo here showing a difference, and these are all different spring, commonly used spring cereal grains. In the foreground here being a August 13th planting, the photo taken on October 8th, and in the background here a September 21st planting. So you can see that difference. That's of course a little over a month, but a big difference in the amount of growth you'll see. And so in general, our rule of thumb, probably for Southwest Nebraska and Northeast Colorado as well, is that you want to really get them planted or by September 1st to produce significant fall forage. And of course, earlier the better. For the warm season annuals I showed earlier, yes, you can get some late July plantings and even into early August, but certainly we use August 10th as the deadline, if you will, if you're looking for significant fall forage production. Now, talk a little bit about grazing some of these annual forages, and in general, the small grains or the Nebraska types of things, as you would expect, are a little bit easier to manage. But when it comes to some of those summer annuals, like the sorghum Sedan grass hybrids, your cane type of forages, it can be a little bit more difficult. They do grow so fast, once they're in the peak of the summer, and a lot of times you'll notice or have a lot of trampling losses, and they're stripping leaves, and so the grazing is just much more harder to manage. And so getting a handle on that grazing management is to try to more efficiently graze those is very important. And when it comes to grazing, say, versus haying, we know that grazing is not as efficient as haying. Obviously, we do have trampling and some of the losses that take place with grazing. And to some extent, the grazing interrupts that plant growth and may reduce the potential growth of that particular forage. We will certainly, of course, recommend starting at the appropriate stage or height. So with something like, say, spring planted oats, you're going to want to see it at about 6 inches in height before you start grazing. And typically that was going to be occurring the third week of May. Now with a sorghum Sedan grass or straight Sedan grass, for example, looking at 18 to 24 inches in height, you certainly better be out there and getting started on the grazing of that. The other thing with those annual forages is what is the carrying capacity or stocking rate going to be? And here in these tables, we put together based on the potential hay yield from these annual forages. And this is the spring planted ones, against things such as oats, spring triticale, barley, and so on. Or it could also apply to the late summer winter annual, apply to the fall planted winter annuals like rye or triticale that are grazed in the spring. Then we base this on a grazing efficiency of about 50%. And with that, I mean 50% of what we have out there is actually consumed by the animal. And so I've got a different potential hay yield numbers here, and certainly, we've seen from our trials getting that 2 to 3 tons per acre should not be a problem. And so using the example of if we had a potential hay yield of 3.5 tons per acre, that means our AUM per acre, or stocking rate carrying capacity, is about 4.49. Or in other words, if we're going to graze those for 1 month, the number of cow-calf pairs we would need per acre is just about 3. If we're going to go for a month and a half grazing period, which would be pretty typical for spring seeded oats, for example, we could be running about 2 pairs per acre for that 1.5 month time frame. So for those summer annuals, same way. And again, this is a Sedan grass, pearl millet, those types of things. And again, let's just use a potential hay yield of 4 tons per acre, which shouldn't be a problem. The number of cow-calf pairs per acre, again, by either 1, 2, or 3 months, and we'll just use 3 months in our example here, where we should be at about just under 1 cow-calf pair per acre for a 3-month period with, say, a Sedan grass type of forage. And then lastly, this would be for the mid and late summer planted cool season annual forages. Again, oats, triticale, so on, are some of the mixtures. Again, we'll use a 2.5 ton potential hay yield with that. And again, for 1 or 2 months, we'll use 2 months. But here we'd use, for example, if it is some oats and grazing during the month of October and November, that'd be 2 months. We should be able to support about 1 cow-calf pair per acre. If you're running yearlings or wean calves, instead of 1.07, we're probably looking at 2.5 to even 3 wean calves per acre for that 2-month time period. Now with these annual forages under irrigation, and some folks have been doing this on and off over the years, rather than planting a corn or soybeans, some other grain crop, they're using that crop ground for double cropped annual forages. And so in some cases, this might include, of course, showing the different growth pattern of these different cool and warm seasons and the time period across the growing season where we can have growth and be producing forages. So with the spring planted cool season annuals, again, with that late March planting, we're probably talking about growth and productivity during May and June. With the warm seasons, a late May planting, it's July and August and just a little bit into early September. And then with the mid or late summer planted cool season annuals, we're looking at primarily September to October growth and production. And so we've also worked out some different combinations using different fields where we're planning either sequencing either cool or warm season forages so that we might get a more continuous flow of having growing forage available for grazing. So in this example here in field number 1, we've got a winter annual such as rye that was planted the previous fall. That's maybe ready to graze beginning in mid-April or so. And by the end of May, that rye is grazed out. Immediately after that, we're coming in and planting a warm season forage like Sedan grass. And that's ready to graze in the early part of July, possibly up to September. And then after the Sedan grass is grazed out, coming in with another winter annual such as the rye again. In another field, we might plant a spring cool season forage such as oats. That's done in late March, early April. That oats is grazed the latter part of May and through June, maybe into early July. But then after a short fallow period and that oats is grazed out, we come back in again and plant a cool season annual forage for the fall grazing period. Another example here, so something similar. Here in the first field, we've got a cool season such as oats grazed here. Again, replant that cool season in mid-late summer for fall. In another field, we have planted in late May a warm season annual. It's grazed for almost 3 months during July, August, September. And after it's out, grazed out, we plant a winter annual forage for the next spring, such as rye. And then an optional in field 3 is, again, a March planted a cool season annual forage that's grazed or could be hayed in late June. And there's still time to plant a warm season annual forage after that oats is grazed or grazed out or hayed, and then come in with that warm season for stockpiling it for fall or winter grazing. And so when it comes to some of those fall or winter grazing options, certainly the standing stockpile, even on the tall season summer annual, the tall summer annuals such as Sedan grass, that does work fairly well. Windrow grazing in late fall and winter is another option that some people have used successfully. When it comes to freeze down, now here we're talking about some of the cool seasons such as late summer planted oats or turnips. But in this trial here, they looked at the quality of the oats in either November here when it was still green prior to completely freezing down versus December where it had really been exposed to cold temperatures. As you can see, it's lost its green and somewhat collapsed. But in grazing trials, it's surprising that cattle will still graze this very well and pick it up. But and what you'll notice when you look at the 2 dates, say for the oats in November of around 20%, but after that hard freeze, even though it's frozen, we're still looking at about 20% crude protein content. And similar for the turnips. Okay, lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other forage opportunities within our cropping systems. And I showed this earlier about the picture here showing a forage cocktail or cover crop mix planted into some wheat stubble. There's some other possibilities. Here's a photo with oats that was interseeded into wheat stubble in late July. So there's a combination of both volunteer wheat, but mostly oats out there. And in this particular example here, it's October 20th photo, and these calves are grazing this standing oats, but the grazing is being controlled by what's called a pivot fence, where the fence itself is hanging from the center pivot towers, and basically allocating forage, the new forage to the cattle that are grazing. And then when you want to give the cattle a new allocation, you're simply moving the pivot forward. Also, here's another study that I found from Colorado State, in fact, where they looked at interseeding some different forages into corn or standing corn. And the interseeding was done when the corn was at a V6 stage, which is about June 30th, using some type of modified planters. And we've seen quite a number of these different modifications made to planters where you can be out there interseeding these annual forages, in most cases, into something like corn or even soybeans. But this is the dry matter yield and quality of the different species or mixtures that they interseeded. And so in the fall of the year at harvest, the corn stalks had a yield of over 6,100 pounds per acre. Annual ryegrass was one of the forages they interseeded. That produced about 500 pounds. Crimson clover didn't do so well, only 16 pounds per acre dry matter yield. The combination of annual ryegrass plus crimson clover was 319 pounds per acre. Winter triticale, again, given that June 5th or June 30th planting date, a little too early for it, and it only produced about 52 pounds in the fall there. Nebraska mix of some turnips and those types of species did the best, 705 pounds dry matter per acre. Combination of winter triticale and brassicas, just 382. So um, not really impressive yields in terms of what they were getting, but still substantial to some extent. And certainly when you look at the quality of those interseeded species, really could boost the overall quality of the corn stock forages that you're grazing. Oh, in some other cases, we have had some success when there's, say, early moisture, high moisture corn harvested, done, of course, a little bit earlier in the season. And this one here has some turnips and radishes interseeded into that. And so that residue does look pretty good with both the available corn stalks as well as the green radishes that are growing there. This is probably an eastern or southeastern Nebraska photo, though. Um, Here's one turnips in corn, in silage corn residue, and you can see that that done fairly well. So if we had some late August corn that was harvested for silage, something like turnips or ryegrass, even oats, may produce a fair amount of forage for a bit later in the fall. Something that's also popular in eastern Nebraska, where they have a lot of seed corn, they are able to go in and after detasseling the parts of the rows, they're coming in with some turnips or other annual, cool season annuals, and getting some extra grazing off of those. So with that, I just want to say thank you, and I look forward to our live discussions after these presentations.